It was an ordinary day when something unusual happened to John. He lived in a small town where life was calm and peaceful. John worked at a local grocery store and enjoyed helping people every day. That morning, he went to the market early to buy some fresh fruits and bread for himself. He liked to start his day with a little walk and some fresh air before work. The sun was shining gently and the birds were singing in the trees. Everything seemed normal. John had just bought a small bag of apples and some bread and was walking back to his car. He had placed the bag carefully in his backpack. Suddenly, he noticed a small shadow moving quickly near the parking lot. Before he could understand what was happening, a little hand grabbed the bread from his bag and ran away, fast. John was shocked. He looked around and saw a small child, no bigger than 6 or 7 years old, running away from him. But this child was not like any other child John had seen before. The child looked strange. His skin was a pale green color, and his eyes were big and shiny, almost glowing in the sunlight. His clothes were torn and dirty, and he looked very weak and tired. John had never seen anything like this before. At first, he was angry because someone had stolen from him. But then he noticed the child's face. The child looked scared and hungry. His small hands trembled, and his eyes were full of tears. John stopped chasing the child and instead watched him from a distance. The child looked back once, as if asking for help, but quickly turned and ran into a nearby alley. John was confused. Why would a little child steal food like this? And why did he look so strange? His curiosity grew, and he decided to follow, quietly. The alley was narrow and dark, filled with old boxes and trash cans. John walked carefully, trying not to make noise. He saw the child move quickly through the alley and then stop near a rusty metal door. The child looked around to make sure no one was watching and then knocked softly on the door. The door opened a little, and the child slipped inside. John waited outside, feeling a mix of fear and hope. After a few moments, the door opened again, but this time, an older woman appeared. She was very thin and looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. Her clothes were old and worn out, and her face showed many lines of worry. The child went inside quickly, and the woman closed the door behind him. John felt his heart tighten. Something was wrong. This woman and child were in trouble. John did not want to leave them alone. He decided to wait and watch. As time passed, he saw the woman open the door a little again. She looked outside carefully, making sure no one was nearby. Then she took a small bag and went out slowly, moving as if she had no strength left. John could see she was very weak, and her steps were slow and painful. He wanted to help but was not sure how. He did not know who they were or why they were hiding. But he knew one thing. They needed help. John thought about what to do next. Should he talk to them? Should he call someone? He was afraid they might run away if he came too close. John decided to stay quiet for a while longer and watch. He saw the woman go to a nearby park bench and sit down carefully. She held her stomach, looking very tired and in pain. The child came out again, carrying the bread John had lost. The child gave the bread to his mother. She smiled weakly, but did not eat immediately. She looked around, still worried. John felt sad. He had never seen such pain and fear in anyone before. The child looked up at the sky as if asking for something he could not get. John realized the child was trying his best to take care of his mother, even if it meant stealing food. The little alien was not bad. He was just hungry and scared. John's heart softened. He wanted to help this small family, but he also knew it would not be easy. They lived in a world that was not kind to strangers, especially those who looked different. The woman and child were hiding for a reason, and John wanted to understand why. He took a deep breath and decided to be patient. Maybe, if he showed kindness slowly, they would trust him. John sat on a bench nearby, still watching the small metal door. He kept the apples and bread he had bought, thinking about sharing them when the time was right. As the sun started to set, the park grew quieter. The woman and child stayed inside the small shelter, but John knew this was only the beginning. He felt a new responsibility growing inside him. Something inside said he could not leave them alone. The night came with a cool breeze. John went home but could not stop thinking about the child and his mother. He wondered where they had come from and how they had ended up in such a hard place. He wanted to learn their story, to help in any way he could. John knew his life was about to change. What started as a simple day with a stolen loaf of bread had turned into something much bigger. He was ready to face whatever came next, to protect and care for those who needed him most. After that day, John's mind kept going back to the small alien child and his mother. He wanted to know more about them. He felt a strong need to help, but he knew he had to be careful. The world could be scary for them, and they might not trust him easily. So John decided to watch from a distance and learn more before he tried to talk to them. The little shelter where the woman and child lived was hidden well. It was in an old part of town, where buildings were old and broken, and few people visited. The metal door was rusty, and there was only a small window covered with dirty cloth. John could see that the place was cold and dark inside. It was not a home anyone would choose, but it was all they had. One evening, John came closer to the shelter again. The sky was turning orange with the setting sun. He stood quietly behind some bushes and watched. Suddenly, the door opened slowly, and the woman stepped out. She looked even weaker than before. Her face was pale, and her hands shook as she held a small cloth bundle close to her chest. John felt his heart ache. He understood that the woman was very sick. She moved slowly toward a small bench nearby and sat down carefully. The child came out a few minutes later carrying a few pieces of wood. He worked quickly, stacking the wood to make a small fire in an old metal container next to the bench. John watched as the little boy's hands trembled, but he worked with great care. The fire gave off a warm orange light, and the mother smiled softly. She looked at her child with deep love, even though her eyes showed pain. The child gave her a small piece of bread, and she took it slowly. John could see how hungry they both were. John realized the child was trying so hard to take care of his mother. Even though he was small and weak, he did not give up. He did everything he could to keep them warm and fed. John felt a new respect for the child's bravery. That night, John stayed hidden but close by. He wanted to protect them if anything bad happened. The cold wind blew softly, and the fire flickered. The woman whispered something in a strange language to her child. The child nodded and smiled, trying to be strong. John's heart told him that these two were alone and scared in a world that did not understand them. He wanted to help, but he was still unsure how. Over the next few days, John came to the shelter often. He brought small things quietly, some food, water, and warm blankets. He never tried to meet them directly because he did not want to frighten them. Instead, he left the gifts near the door and watched from a distance as the child found them and brought them inside. One morning, John saw the woman opening the door a little and stepping out. She looked very weak, and it was clear she needed medical help. John felt worried. How long could she survive without proper care? He wanted to call a doctor but was afraid the woman and child might be taken away or treated badly because they were different. John knew he had to find another way to help. One afternoon, while John was near the shelter, he noticed the child sitting outside alone. The child looked sad and tired. John took a deep breath and slowly walked closer. He held out a small sandwich he had prepared. The child looked up, surprised, but did not move away. John smiled gently and spoke softly. "I'm not here to hurt you. I want to help." The child's eyes were wide and cautious. After a few moments, he reached out and took the sandwich carefully. John sat a little distance away and waited. The child ate slowly, still watching John carefully. John tried to learn the child's name. He said his own name first and repeated it softly. The child looked at him and then whispered, "Leo." John smiled and said, "Hello, Leo. I'm John." The moment felt small but important. John realized that trust was starting to grow, even if it was very little. After that day, John visited more often and brought food and warm clothes. He learned that Leo was very brave but worried about his mother. The mother's name was Mira, and she was very sick because their planet was very far away, and they had traveled a long way to Earth. The trip had made her weak, and she needed help to get better. John wanted to do more. He looked for information about medicine that could help Mira. He went to a local clinic and talked to a nurse without telling the whole story. The nurse gave him advice on how to care for someone who was weak and tired. John promised to do everything he could. Each day, John's visits became longer. He sat quietly near the shelter and listened to Mira's soft voice and Leo's small laughter when he tried to make his mother smile. The little family's love was strong, even when life was hard. John also noticed that the neighborhood was not kind to strangers. Some people looked at the shelter with suspicion. Rumors started to spread about strange things happening near the old buildings. John felt worried that Mira and Leo might be in danger. One evening, as John was leaving, he heard voices nearby. Some people were talking loudly about strange creatures and calling for help to remove them. John felt his heart race. He knew he had to protect Mira and Leo from these fears and dangers. He decided to talk to Mira and Leo soon. He wanted to tell them he was there to help, no matter what. But he also wanted to be sure they trusted him. John understood that helping them would not be easy. They needed safety, medicine, and kindness in a world that often showed fear instead. He promised himself to be patient and brave. John looked up at the stars that night and wished for a miracle. He wished that Mira could heal, that Leo could laugh freely, and that together they could find peace on this strange new earth. John knew that Mira and Leo needed more than just food and blankets. Mira's illness was serious, and she needed medicine and care if she was going to get better. But John also knew that Mira and Leo were afraid. They had been hiding for a long time, and trusting anyone was hard for them. So John decided to be patient. He wanted to earn their trust before trying to help more directly. Every day, John came near the shelter. Sometimes he sat quietly nearby, reading a book or just watching the world go by. He hoped Mira and Leo could see he was friendly. Sometimes he left small gifts, fresh fruits, medicine from the pharmacy, or warm clothes. He never came too close without permission. He wanted them to feel safe. One afternoon, while John was sitting on a bench a little distance away, he saw Mira come out of the shelter. She looked very weak and shaky. Leo was helping her walk slowly toward the small fire they had made before. Mira's breathing was heavy, and her face was pale. John's heart hurt to see her like that. John stood up and took a few steps forward, making sure he was not too close to scare them. He called softly, "Mira, I brought some medicine. It might help you feel better." Mira stopped and looked at him with tired eyes. At first, she seemed confused, as if she didn't understand what he said. But then she nodded slowly and took the small box from John's hands. Leo looked at John with wide eyes but did not move away. John smiled gently to show he meant no harm. For the first time, Mira spoke a few words in broken English. "Thank you. Very much," she whispered. John felt warmth in his chest. It was the first time Mira had spoken to him. He knew this was the beginning of something important. Over the next days, John visited Mira and Leo more often. He learned about their life before Earth. Mira told him that they came from a distant planet, a place full of light and peace, but a terrible war had forced them to leave. The journey to Earth was long and difficult. Mira became sick during the trip, and they had no one to help them here. Leo was very quiet, but sometimes smiled when John played little games with him. John showed Leo pictures of Earth animals and plants, and Leo was fascinated. John realized that even though Leo looked different, he was just like any other child, curious, playful, and full of hope. John wanted to do more than just bring medicine. He wanted to help Mira get better in other ways. He talked to a local nurse he trusted and asked for advice on how to care for someone who was weak and sick. The nurse gave him simple tips: how to keep Mira warm, how to help her rest, and how to feed her healthy food. John brought these things to Mira and helped her as best as he could. He sat with her when she felt too weak to stand and helped Leo keep the fire going. He even fixed the small shelter's door so it would close better and keep the cold out. One day, Mira's condition got worse. She was too weak to get out of bed, and her breathing was very slow. John felt worried and scared. He knew he had to act fast. He gently suggested to Mira that maybe it was time to see a doctor. Mira shook her head, afraid. She did not want to go to a hospital or a clinic because she was afraid people would take her and Leo away. John understood her fear. He promised her, "I will stay with you. I will protect you. We will find help, but only if you want." Slowly, Mira agreed. John helped her to a small clinic nearby. He spoke to the doctor quietly and explained the situation without saying too much about Mira and Leo's origins. The doctor was kind and agreed to help without asking questions. Mira received medicine and care. The doctor told John to watch over her carefully and to bring her back if she felt worse. John felt relief, but also new responsibility. He was now a guardian for Mira and Leo. Back at the shelter, John stayed longer than usual. He helped Leo prepare food and keep the shelter clean. The small family began to feel a little safer with John around. They started to smile more, and laughter came back in small moments. John learned that kindness could cross worlds. Even though Mira and Leo were very different from everyone else, they needed the same things: love, care, and hope. One evening, as John was leaving, Mira held his hand gently and said, "Thank you, John. You are like family." John smiled, feeling a deep happiness. He knew the road ahead was still hard, but for the first time he believed they could face it together. As John continued to help Mira and Leo, word began to spread in the neighborhood. Some people noticed the small shelter near the old buildings and became curious. Others were frightened by rumors about strange creatures living in the area. These rumors quickly grew into worries and fears. One afternoon, John was near the shelter when he heard loud voices. A small group of people had gathered, talking angrily. They were saying things like, "We don't want strange creatures here," and "They don't belong in our town." John felt a deep sadness. He knew these words could hurt Mira and Leo, who were already struggling just to survive. John wanted to protect them. He decided to speak to the people and explain the truth, but he also knew that fear was strong and not everyone would listen, so he chose to be careful. That evening, John went to the local community center where the neighbors often met. He spoke softly but clearly about Mira and Leo. He told the story of their journey, their struggles, and their need for kindness and support. Some people listened quietly, but others looked worried. One woman stood up and said, "We can't risk having strangers who might be dangerous. We need to keep our town safe." John understood her fear. He explained, "Mira and Leo are not dangerous. They are like us, trying to live and be safe. They just need help." The conversation was difficult. Many people were afraid of what they did not understand. John realized that helping Mira and Leo would mean facing this fear head-on. Meanwhile, Mira's health was still fragile. She depended on John's care and Leo's love. One night, Mira's breathing became very weak. John and Leo stayed with her, holding her hand and whispering words of comfort. John thought about what to do next. He knew that staying hidden was not safe anymore. If people kept spreading fear, Mira and Leo could be taken away or hurt. He needed a plan to protect them. John reached out to a small group of friends who believed in kindness and helping others. Together, they made a decision. They would find a safer place for Mira and Leo, somewhere they could live without fear. Moving Mira and Leo was not easy. Mira was weak, and the journey had to be slow and careful. John carried her when she could not walk, and Leo stayed close, holding his mother's hand tightly. After several days, they arrived at a small safe house, run by people who helped those in need. The place was warm and welcoming, with soft beds and good food. Mira rested there and began to feel a little stronger. John stayed with them, feeling relieved, but also aware that the danger was not gone. The world outside was still full of fear and misunderstanding. One day, while John was outside, a group of people came to the safe house. They asked many questions, some friendly, some not. John explained everything he could, showing that Mira and Leo were not a threat. Slowly, some people began to understand. They saw the love between mother and child, and they saw John's care and honesty. A few neighbors even offered to help bring food and medicine. John felt hope growing. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but now Mira and Leo had a chance for safety and support. Together, they faced the fear of others with patience and kindness. John learned that sometimes the hardest battles were not against enemies, but against fear itself. After moving to the safe house, life began to change for Mira, Leo, and John. The place was quiet and warm, a place where Mira could rest without fear. Slowly, Mira's strength started to return. The medicine was working, and the care she received helped her heal day by day. Leo was happy too. For the first time in a long while, he could play outside without hiding. He ran in the small garden near the safe house, laughing and chasing butterflies. John watched with a smile, feeling glad to see the child's joy. John stayed close to the family. He knew they still needed him, and he wanted to make sure nothing bad would happen to them. The neighbors who once feared them started to change. Some came by to bring food, and others offered help with clothes or toys for Leo. One afternoon, Mira sat by the window, watching the sunset. John sat beside her, holding her hand gently. Mira spoke softly. "Thank you, John. You saved us." John shook his head, smiling. "I only did what anyone would do. You and Leo deserve kindness and safety." Mira smiled and looked at her son playing nearby. "We are lucky to find you." John felt a deep happiness. He had never expected to find a family like this, so different, but so close to his heart. As weeks passed, John helped Mira and Leo start a new life. They found a small apartment nearby, safer and warmer than the old shelter. Mira's health continued to improve, and Leo began going to a small school where children were curious but kind. John helped Mira learn more about Earth's ways. He showed her how to use the phone, how to cook different foods, and even how to speak English better. Mira was a quick learner, and she worked hard to understand her new home. John also learned more about Mira and Leo's world. Mira told stories about their planet, a place full of colors, music, and peace. She dreamed of going back one day, but knew she needed to be strong for Leo until that time came. One evening, the three of them sat together under the stars on the apartment roof. Mira held Leo close, and John looked at the sky with them. They felt a quiet hope growing inside. John knew the journey was not over, but he believed that with love and courage, they could face whatever came next. The story of the starving alien. Child and his ailing mother had become a story of friendship, trust, and new beginnings.